This talk is brought to you by Talent Tactics and Amplified Story. So thank you for joining us to part 2 of this talk, which is the interview. Now, I'm pretty sure all of us have experienced where at an interview we get asked a question and we have a complete blank. We completely blank. We have absolutely no idea what to say, how to say it, what even the question is, and it makes us look bad. And we pretty much burn the interview. What I'm hoping right now I'll be able to show you is a couple tricks and to really prepare yourself, not just for the interview that's coming up, but for any interview that you might have in the future. And really, there's a couple things that you need to know about interview. The more prepared you are for an interview, the more confident you're going to be, the more you're going to be yourself for that interview, and the more the real you is going to come out. The more stressed you are, the more unprepared you are, you're going to be a deer in the headlights with those questions. So hopefully what I'm going to be able to teach you here is how to prepare for an interview, any interview. Doesn't matter if it's going to be a bad interview, a star interview, a behavioral interview, a situational interview. You're going to be prepared for this. But it's going to take some self-reflection on your time and actually do a little bit of soul searching on yourself and be really truthful about your strengths and your weaknesses, because those questions are going to come. Now, I'm going to tell you why people have these deer in headlights in interviews, because unfortunately we are programmed to be dumb when we are stressed. When we are stressed, we have what's called the flight or fight response, or fight-flight response. And the idea here is your brain doesn't do higher executive functions or thinking. It just wants to either run away or fight whatever's happening. And of course, you wouldn't get the job if you attacked your interviewer, right? And so the idea here is that you need to really calm yourself down in order to have a good interview. I'll give you an example. How many of you have had a fight with a spouse, coworker, sibling, whatever it may be, and like 15 minutes later, you came back with the greatest comeback, example, or you would have totally showed them their place if you would have said this? Well, that's because during that argument, you became dumber and you couldn't actually think of those things. You were just thinking about fighting or running away. And so that's the exact same principle that happens in a job interview. The more stressed you are, the dumber you are in your interview. And the idea behind this is the more prepared, the more confident you are, the calmer you are, the better your interview will be. So here's the trick. When you're waiting for your interview, just take deep breaths. 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Okay, now don't do it in front of the person. Hey, how are you? Okay, you're not going to get the job. But the idea behind it is you're calming yourself right before the interview. You're actually going to be able to have smarter answers the calmer you are. Next, bring yourself, maybe a jacket if it's cold, your resume, whatever it may be, but do not bring a hat, glasses, your bag, your purse, if you went shopping, additional shoes, scarves, belt, whatever it may be. Minimal accessories, because you're going to have to manage them. You're going to have to pick them up, drop them off, put them wherever it may be. You want to have minimal accessories for your interview. That way there's just a lot less to worry about. Just bring yourself. If you have a jacket, leave it in the car, a suitcase, whatever it may be, leave that, briefcase. So while you might be living out of your car, but just leave everything in your car and just bring yourself, okay? You're going to thank me for it. Bring extra copies. I was actually once in an interview. 4 people interviewed me. Not a single one of them had my resume because they thought the other person was going to bring in the copies for their resume. And I was the hero by being able to provide everyone with a resume. I looked prepared. So when you get that call for an interview, ask how many people are going to interview and have that many resumes plus one for yourself. Okay, so you guys can sort of follow along and that sort of thing. Bring extra copies for your resume or for your interview. Research the job and the company. You got to do your research. The more you know, the more confident you will be, the better answers you'll have. So that means researching the job, call other people, ideally in that company. Say, hey, I have a job interview. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the job, what you do. Do reconnaissance. Find out what people do for that job, or go on LinkedIn, find people who have that similar position, give them a call and say, hey, I have a job interview in a couple of days. Can I give you a call? Can you give me a couple tips? That sort of thing. Search out subject matter experts. Subject matter experts are the people that are actually doing the job that you're applying for. So seek them out. Get as much information. Even you might be able to send them their resume and say, hey, is there something I should really talk about in my interview, whatever it may be. Seek those individuals out and search the company out. There's a trick in Google. If you type in the company name and then under additional search tools, you can actually search by last month, last week, last year, whatever it may be. Do that and see what comes up in the last year. You want that relevant information, because what you're going to do is if you type in the company name, the most sort of relevant, so something relevant and important might have happened 5 years ago, but what you want is that hook, right? The most recent information. So search on Google, get that information, find out as much as you can about the company, not just on the company website, but use Google to search for articles, people within that organization, especially presidents, CEOs that might be passionate about community involvement and that sort of thing. Do a lot of research. Write that stuff down. Write it down, questions you might have, examples and situations when you're doing your research. And I can't believe how many people don't do this. Bring your notes into the interview. You know why? Because you're dumb. Remember, when you're doing that interview, you're stressed and your higher level reasoning has dropped down. And so by having your notes, you'll be able to remember those important questions that you have, those important examples. I actually once got a job because I brought in my entire binder of places I've applied for, questions I have, and I actually, under my salary, I had a budget of the bare minimum that I had to earn. And they're like, can I see your binder? I'm like, of course, you're not going to say, no, this is mine. So I gave them my binder. And they were flipping through and they actually stopped at the budget. And they're like, what's this? And I said, this is my minimum budget that I need to survive. And I think it was 40,000 at the end of it. When I took everything account, it was 40,000. I got the job and they started me off at 44. And the reason why the job range was actually 40,000, he was so impressed by the organization and how I took applying for a job. And I actually had the right salary, but for that position, but also sort of reasoning where, and there wasn't anything, anything excessive in that budget. But he realized that 40,000 is something that I needed to work on or live off of. So remember, bring in your notes. They're going to help you. You're going to refer back to them. You're going to put your examples, the situations, everything that when you're doing your research, you're going to bring in that those notes in there. They're going to really help in your interview. They're going to make you look more professional, more prepared. But don't be the whole, so they ask you a question and you're like, hold on. Wait. Right? They're there. So like have a single cheat sheet that you're going to be able to sort of pull information from. Don't bring in, the whole 150 pages of research that you've done for all of the companies. You might want to just bring in the notes for that specific company. So, phone interview. Usually people will screen you for a phone interview. So here's the trick for a phone interview. They call you up and say, hey, this is so-and-so for company X. We'd like to do a screening interview. Is this a good time? You're going to say no, but can I call you back in 5 minutes? You take their name and number. Now you have their contact information. If you get disconnected, whatever it may be, don't say no, this is not a good time. Call me in 2 days or 3 days or the whole thing. If you can, remember, you're trying to get that job. So the more you inconvenience them, the worse you look. So, say, I'm not in a quiet place. Let me get to a quiet place. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. You're then going to take all your notes. You're going to sit down. You're going to quickly review all your notes, and you're going to be ready for that job interview. Makes sense, right? So never start off with, you can do it now, because what's going to happen? Your stress is going to increase. What happens when we get stressed? We become dumb, and you're going to have worse questions. So remember, you're going to get their telephone number, their name. You're going to say, I'm going to call them back in 5 minutes. You're going to get all your notes, and you're going to breathe in and out. You're going to calm yourself, and you're going to pick up the phone, and you're going to give them a call. Fair enough. They're going to probably ask you, the number one question is, why did you apply for this position? Make sure you are able to answer why you applied for that position. You like the company, you like the position, you like the work, you've always wanted to work for that company, it's something that you're interested. Bob in accounting, he says wonderful things about your organization, whatever it may be, you really want to work for that company. The second thing, most likely, what they're going to ask you is, what are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? There's a whole different ways of answering this question, but ultimately what you want to say is, hopefully with your organization, or you're going to use the name of the organization with company X, in the same role with additional responsibilities or more senior responsibilities, showing that progression. What you don't want to say is, hopefully with company X and have your position, or with company X and be the CEO. If you have unrealistic job expectations, or you want to progress too quickly in a company, they're not going to want to hire you. So ultimately, you want to see that you do want to progress, but you're applying for that position. You're not applying for that position as a foothold for something else. I hope that makes sense. You really do have to do some self-reflection and know what you're exceptional in. What are your strengths? And know what they are and list them down. List all your strengths and be able to answer when they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you, if not on the phone interview, they're going to ask you in your interview, what are your strengths? So make sure that you are able to name your strengths, and looking at the job ad, if you can sort of pull information from what those strengths are, it's going to make a big difference. They're going to ask you, now it used to be, what are your weaknesses? And people found out that was sort of, they didn't want, oh, I care too much, or I'm really passionate about my work, I'm detail oriented, I'm a perfectionist. So now what they're doing is they're switching the wording around to, what do you struggle with? What don't you enjoy? That sort of thing, trying to sort of coax you on your weaknesses. Be frank. What don't you like doing? So if there's something, for example, you hate data entry, and that job is 90% data entry, you're going to hate yourself. You're going to hate yourself for taking that job. You're going to be miserable, and you're going to take that misery home with you. Okay, so know what you're good at, know what you struggle with, and be able to really be honest with yourself. Don't lie, because if you're going to lie, it's going to be a mismatch in that position, and you're going to be miserable, and the company's going to be miserable. But strengths and weaknesses, guaranteed it's going to be asked, whether it's on a pre-screening or whether it's going to be in the actual interview itself. And think back, what would your boss, your last 5 bosses say about you, both positive and negative, and write it down. So what would boss A say about you that's good and bad, B, C, D, and so on. So that's going to give you some additional information to reflect upon. Rarely do we kind of reflect upon ourselves. You're always thinking, what are they going to ask? Well, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't sort of, unfortunately, can't pull information from you that you haven't thought about in a really long time, especially in a stressful situation. So this is the time to self-reflect. What would your bosses say? Hey, maybe call them up, reconnect, because you're going to use them as a reference, and say, hey, what would you say about I'm applying for these jobs? What would you say my strengths and weaknesses were? Where did I struggle? And that sort of thing. One other thing about weaknesses that I forgot to mention, name your weakness, but also be able to show them how you're able to overcome that. So for example, let's say, oh, you know what, I have a real bad memory because my job requires me to do so many multitasking, but I make sure I write everything down that when people ask me to do, I have a notebook and I write everything down. That way it's my to-do list and I never miss something. So I might forget something, but it's always in my notebook when somebody's asking me, and so I don't miss it. So when you're doing a weakness, make sure it's an actual weakness. I care too much is a BS answer that everyone's going to go, I've heard this so much before. Don't do those. They annoy people. Do real weaknesses, but also show them how you're able to overcome. And remember what your last bosses say. Take that job ad and pull out, use jobscan.ca and pull those keywords from that list that they're looking for, those hard skills and soft skills, and be able to pull them and see the positives and negatives where you excel with them. And so how were you able to accomplish things in your organization with those skills, and how you were able to learn lessons? What kind of things, through maybe if we go back to communication. So what was something great that you communicate, that you're a great communicator? What was some of the accomplishments through communication? What did you struggle with communication? Calm under pressure, that's something they're asking for. So where were you, where did you excel under being under pressure, and where did you struggle? So have both positive and negatives, because the chances are it's going to be one of those 2 questions. So again, use JobScan, which we learned about part 1. So if you haven't done part 1, go back to part 1. And pull those keywords out from the job ad and be able to do positives and negatives on that. So lessons learned. Remember, both positive and negatives on those keywords, and write them down. Don't just think about them, write them down, because if you just think about them, you're going to forget. Write them down, the positives and negatives, because that's what they're looking for. In the job ad, we want this person with these skills. They're going to eventually ask those questions about those competencies. So you're going to eventually have that interview. Dress appropriately. If you can, before the interview, ask them what their dress code is, because you don't want to overdress, but it's always better to overdress than underdress. Usually it's going to be either business casual, suit and tie, whatever it may be. If they just mean casual, don't go in with a muscle shirt and shorts and flip-flops. Khaki pants, a nice dress shirt or a golf shirt, a pencil skirt, a blouse, jacket, whatever it may be. For women, don't show bare shoulders, sleeves, and that sort of thing. You want it, not a lot of cleavage, I know, but keep the girls in. And the reason why is you want to show professionalism. So eventually you're going to be asked for an interview, and they're going to ask you, what did you do in your last position, or that sort of thing. But think of it this way. What were you hired to do? Okay, so you might have been a customer service agent, so they're going to ask you, so what did you do in your last position? And your answer usually is, I was a customer service agent, right? But think of it this way, as what were you hired to do? So I was hired to take calls from angry customers and try to find a win-win solution in order for the customer to keep buying from us. That's a much better answer than I was a customer service rep. So think for your last 5 positions, what were you hired to do? Not what your position said, but what were the tasks, and try to come up with like a power statement of about 2 or 3 sentences of what you were actually hired to do. Next, always think about what you actually accomplished. What did you accomplish in that position? Did you leave that position better? Did you leave the company in a better spot than you actually left? If the answer is no, well, you haven't really accomplished much in those positions, and you have to be honest with yourself. So just think about it. What were some of the key projects, key ideas, key tasks that you truly helped the company move to the next level? Because that's what companies are looking for. This is another way of sort of naming strengths. So they'll ask you, what did you accomplish? Name some of your strengths, that sort of thing. It's a sort of play with the strengths. Another play with strengths that people might use is, what are your low points? So what really got you down in that position? What did you struggle? What didn't you enjoy? They're just looking for that fit. Making sure that if they hire you, those low points aren't the points that are really critical to the position that you're applying for. And that's really the point of it. And you gotta be honest. Don't lie to yourself. We tend to lie to ourselves and saying that we think we're a lot better than we are. We're not that awesome. We all have flaws. We all struggle. We all don't like doing certain things, and we love doing other things of a job. So be truthful in what were your low points. What did you learn from that? How did you get through them? How did you overcome them? How did you delegate, eliminate, whatever it may be? But be open, honest, and be able to clearly state what the low points were in that position. They're going to ask you some kind of question about your team. Who did you like working with? Who didn't you like? What are some of your pet peeves? Name me a situation where you didn't get along with a coworker, that sort of thing. So think back about the department you worked in, the team that you worked with, whatever it may be, and which were the people, what kind of personalities did you like working with, which personalities you avoided. With difficult people, how did you handle those situations? And write that down. Write that information down, so when they ask you, who do you like working with? What are your pet peeves? How do you deal with difficult people? Give me a situation of where you disagreed with a coworker. Give me a situation where you and your manager didn't see eye to eye. Whatever it may be, reflect back about your team and what were the strengths and weaknesses. What kind of teams did you enjoy working with? Which kind of teams did you struggle with, didn't you enjoy, and you left? And ultimately, they're going to ask you, why did you leave that position? So if you got fired, be honest. I got fired, but what you're going to do is what you learned from that termination. You're not going to play the victim of, it was not my fault, I didn't see it coming, they didn't let me know, my manager hated me. If your manager hated you, there's a reason why your manager hated you. What did you do for your manager to hate you? And so saying, I have no idea, again, it doesn't really show self-reflection and that you know the real you. So the idea here is, if you got fired, don't hide it, be upfront about it, saying, hey, I got fired because I missed a deadline, I was coming in late, but after that, I realized how attendance was important, how it affected everyone else in my department, and I'm never late again. So if you're able to show how you learned from that termination, by all means, be upfront and honest. People will figure it out eventually that you got terminated, and if you lied in the interview or whatever it may be, it's going to actually hurt you in the long run than just being honest with it. If you left for more money, tell them that you left for better opportunities, better skill sets, whatever it may be. If you don't ever say I've outgrown the position, because it just shows that you got bored. You didn't like it, whatever it may be, because there's always ways to develop a position, take additional tasks. The problem is, if you can't do your job well, and you don't do your job well, and you ask for additional tasks, no one's going to give you those additional tasks. The reason, why would they? You can't do your job that you're doing right now. And so when I hear I've outgrown my position, it just showed that you weren't doing your job all that great, and you didn't either look at tasks that you were additional tasks, or they didn't want to give you additional tasks because you couldn't do your job well. So just be honest. Termination, be honest about it. Left for better opportunities, but stuff like I didn't get along with my manager, that sort of thing kind of brings up red flags. And so here are some key red flags that I have found over time that it just holds true. And when I hear people saying these things, I know that this is not a good person or not a good fit. One is, if you start negotiating, and here's the thing, sure, negotiate, but if you're like, I'm take it or leave it, I'm not moving for this position, it kind of brings me a red flag that you truly don't want to work for my company, you just want more money, which is fair. Everyone has to have their goals. The other thing is, if I've actually posted a range, so let's say I posted a range between $50,000 and $60,000. Really, my upper limit is $60,000. That's what I'm willing to pay for at the beginning. And you come in and say, well, I'm currently making $70,000 and I've posted 60. I'm now mad, right? You've wasted my time. You're a good candidate. I was willing to pay you top dollar, which was 60. Now you're negotiating for 70. It doesn't start a relationship off well. And studies have shown people who renegotiate for a much higher salary than they were initially hired to usually leave companies within 18 months. And so it's one of these things that's a really red flag when money's really important for that person, especially if that range is posted. If it's not posted, bring it up in the interview saying, what is the salary range for this position? And if they say, 50 to 60 and you're looking at 70 to 80, let them know then, hey, I'm looking for 70 to 80 at the interview level, because you're wasting people's time if at the end they've picked you as their top candidate and you're not going to take the job for less than $70,000. So it's really key when people start negotiating and starts being a real sort of point of contention. I just walk away, and I've done this before when they counter and I'm like, well, no, thank you. And they're like, oh, I was just negotiating. You knew my range. And I just know those individuals, it's always about more money. What I would recommend is, if you're taking a smaller salary, bring out, well, you know what, I'm more than happy to take 60,000. Would it be possible at my 3-month review to talk about it, to sort of maybe move up? If I'm able to meet all your goals and I'm exceeding your expectations and I'm awesome, could we talk about an increase at the 3-month level? That's a much better way of negotiating, already getting that position, than it is to saying, I'm not taking that position for less than 70. Here's the reason why. Now I'm paying a premium dollar for you. My expectations just went through the roof. I want you to not make mistakes, not require a lot of training, be able to start from day one running in the whole thing. And if you're not, it's going to cause frustration in the relationship. So that's one of the things. The other thing that kind of annoys me is a Mr. Know-it-all. This is a person that interrupts me, finishes my sentences, tells me that they already know, or yeah, I knew that, or that sort of thing. Or if we're in a discussion and I point out they didn't say this, or I was looking for that, they'll go, oh, I knew that you were saying that. I just thought this was, sir. A Mr. Know-it-all really frustrates a person. You want to be a little bit humble. The employer wants to feel a little bit important, right? right? They don't want to be talked down to. They don't want to be lectured to. They don't want to be belittled. So although they might be not having the right processes, or you don't want to criticize them about their sort of interview process, about their company website, or oh, I could do this and this and this and that, and oh, you should really hire me because I could take the company to a new level. Well, what a company first wants you to do is learn their processes. And then once you learn their processes, if you can bring value or improve those processes, absolutely. But you're going to have very little credibility if you come into a company and say, hey, I have these great ideas, when you don't actually understand why those processes are in place. Another one, I call this the Teflon man. Nothing ever sticks. Nothing's my fault. You're a victim of everything. You've been laid off for every single position you ever applied for, ever had. If you've been laid off on every single position that you've ever applied for, chances are it's you. That there's something that you're at the first level of layoffs. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the C players, the people that aren't performing at the level that they should be. And so if during that interview, like, you learned no lessons, you made no mistakes, nothing was your fault, you've been a victim, you tried to get sympathy and empathy from me, oh, you poor thing, let me give you this job, you've had such a hard life. No one likes that. No one likes a victim. No one likes the Teflon man. We want to know if you've made mistakes and have you learned from those mistakes. So don't be a Teflon person. Next one. If you speak poorly of your past supervisors, managers, employer, company, industry, whatever it may be, chances are you're going to speak poorly of your current employer once you get a job. And so it's one of those things, don't say negative things. Listen to your mother. If you can't say something nice, don't say it at all. It wasn't a good fit. The company was going in a different direction. There was change management, and I didn't like the way the changes were happening, whatever it may be, but do not speak poorly about your past employer. It's an automatic red flag when you're super critical about an employer. Now, there's a trick that employers use, so watch out for this trick. If you do criticize, if it slips, whatever, oh, my manager and I didn't get along, what a sly interviewer might do is like, I know, I once had this manager, we didn't get along, and they were just the biggest jerk I've ever had. What was your manager like? What they're trying to do is they're trying to bring your guard down so that you share more negative information of it. Don't fall for that. I say, oh, there's nothing really negative on it. We just, we had different personality types, and that's why I'm looking for a new job. I've tried working things out. I've tried speaking with difficult people, strategies and techniques. It's just not working out for me. But avoid speaking poorly of your past employers. Here's another big one. If you give me poor references, for example, you can't give me your past employer. Now, we do sort of understand as employers that you might not want to give me your current employer, supervisor, manager, because you don't want them to know that you're looking for work and hurt your relationships. We do understand that, but at least be able to provide a coworker in your current position that is able to speak for you on your references. A big red flag is if you are providing me with references that are 5, 6, 7, 15 years old from your first position, because now you're best friends and the whole thing. That's a real red flag. As an employer, I want to speak with your supervisors. So keep in touch or know where your past supervisors have been gone. Go on LinkedIn, try to find them, because ultimately we want to speak to your previous supervisors, your previous managers. We don't want to speak with your coworkers if we don't have to. We don't want to speak with your coach, with your instructors, with your life coach, with your resume person, with your best friend from school, from your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, sisters. No personal references. I don't know where this one comes from. You should provide 2 professional and 1 character reference. No. 3 professional references that are very current. So that might be a supervisor and a coworker in your current position and your last manager or supervisor. If you cannot provide me with your current, or at least your one job past, so not your current job, but your previous job of your current supervisor and manager, it's a red flag for me. That means something happened that you don't want me to speak with that individual about. Companies will say that, I can only speak with HR. True references will not listen to HR, and they will give you references and that sort of thing. And this is what I always say to people. C players will say, I'm sorry, I don't have those references. A players will say, I will do what I can, and I'll do everything to get those references for you. So if they ask for those references, don't say, sorry, I don't have that information. Say, I don't have that information right now, but give me a couple of hours or give me a day and I will try to contact those previous employers. It really, really does help if employers are able to speak to your previous supervisors and managers, people who directly supervised you, or co-workers. Do not, 15, 20-year-old, life has moved on, you've changed, you might have been different from 15 years ago. I don't know what's happened in the last 15 years. That's why I want to speak to your most recent employers, your recent supervisors, your recent managers, your recent co-workers. I don't want to talk to people that you haven't spoken with 15, 5, 10 years past. I hope that makes sense. So that concludes our interview. Hope you enjoyed it. That's part 2. Part 3 is coming up. Again, this talk was sponsored by Talent Tactics and Amplified Story. Thank you.